Today I'm cutting out a hat. This is going to be for Mr. Voodoo. He's picked two fabrics to make a reversible hat. Apparently these are his two favourite things. And the pattern is from You Sew Girl by Nicole Malalou. So being a hat, there's a lot of curves. You've got the brim, you've got the side of the hat, and you've got the top of the hat, which is an actual circle. So if I'd cut all those pieces out and then I cut my interfacing out separately and then I went over to the iron and I fused them, everything is going to skew slightly because of that bias. I run the risk of stretching and just things going a little bit skew with, and then the pieces will not be exactly as they should be. So with block fusing, I'm going to I've cut out the fabric and the interfacing in a rough shape. And I'm going to go over to the iron press and I'm going to press them together, and that's going to give me a nice stable piece of fabric. And then I'll be able to take that stable piece of fabric, cut out my pieces, and then they will be perfectly shaped to match the pattern. And when I sew, they should go together a little bit easier. I'm at the iron press now. I'm going to block fuse this together. So I'm using a couple of different interfacings on this hat, and this piece has a light interfacing. So this is a poly cotton interfacing. It needs to have a cooler iron than some of our heavier interfacings, otherwise it will melt and shrink and it will make it look all horrible. So I've put the interfacing down with the shiny side up, which is a little bit rough, which is the glue, and then I've put my fabric on top of that, and then I'm just going to put a piece of greaseproof paper over the whole thing so it doesn't stick to my iron. And close the iron, press and close, and just wait a few seconds. The reason I like to use an iron press is because it gives a nice even heat and it gives a pressure, which is really good for fusing interfacing. You can do it with your domestic iron, but it just takes so much time, and I decided I didn't have that much time in my life. So I picked up this Elna press secondhand on Gumtree for like 50 bucks, best 50 bucks. So that has fused quite nicely. So the other trick with interfacing is do not move it around too much while it is still hot. The reason for this is because these layers are still cooling, so the glue is still warm. And if you move them around, you're weakening that bond between the two. So there's more of a chance that interfacing will peel away from that fabric as you manipulate the fabric through the sewing machine and with wear. So keep it as flat as possible for as long as possible while it cools. I usually try and move it over and just lie it flat somewhere so it can finish cooling, and then I move on to my next piece. So the next part of my hat is using our heavyweight interfacing, which is quite a heavy cotton. It's fusible on that side. You can tell it's just a little bit shiny. So we're going to do this one now. And I've turned the iron press all the way up to a cotton linen setting because this one needs a very, very, very hot iron, which is why I recommend a heat press for this particular interfacing, because it is the most arduous task to do it with a handheld iron. Not impossible, but very, very boring. This one I will sit and hold it for maybe about 10-15 seconds because it does take a lot of pressure and heat to fuse this interfacing. Lift it up, and then I'll just check the corner here. It looks like it has fused. Okay, nice. Oh, I forgot my paper. Luckily that doesn't have any sticky stuff. And then when you actually have a bigger piece, I'd very carefully move it over and hold it as flat as possible while I pull it down to do the next bit. So it's nearly done now. It's about 15 seconds. Lift it up. So that piece now is fused. So once again, I'll let that sit and cool. When it's a little bit cooler, I'll move it over and bring the next piece over. Just wanted to show you this piece again because it actually has two layers of interfacing. I'm not sure if everybody knows, but you can actually layer interfacing. So if you can't get an interfacing that you feel is thick enough and you put one layer on, you go, I need another layer, or it needs to be twice as thick, you can actually then fuse a second layer on top of that. So I've done my first layer, so I'm literally just going to come around and do the second layer on top. Once again, making sure that the shiny side is up. So now that is the hat brim pieces with 2 layers of interfacing, making quite a stiff piece of fabric. So now that I've fused my interfacing to my fabric, I am able to pin my pattern piece on and trim the pieces. Like so. And one thing I will mention, because we're going to go into the next part of the video, which will be sewing some of the trickier curves for this hat, is it is vitally important to mark your quarter points. I do that with a little snip. This hat has a 1/2 inch seam, so I actually have a lot of leeway in that seam allowance, and I just find this means that I will be able to easily match up these points when I come to assemble the hat. So I've got all my pieces. I have sewn the crown together to form one big loop of fabric, and then that's going to attach to the top of the hat. So whenever attaching something to like a round piece like this or an oval, so for example this is a hat, but you might be making a toy with foot pads, or you might be making a bag that's rounded and has a gusset. It's the same process for all of it. So the trick is you have to have marked these quarter points, which I snipped, and I've also snipped them on here, so the quarter points, because you need to match those. So I will match the back there, and I'll match the front here. There we go, there it is. This is why I like to snip, because you can just match those snips up. And then I'm going to do other quarters. So yep, I've got that one there, and that one there. So I'm pinning so that when I sew that, I'm going to be on the sewing machine like that. So you just keep quartering. So you quarter again and pin, quarter there and pin, quarter and pin, and then I like to come and do one in the middle of that. I mean, you can keep doing this as much as you want. You can have pins every inch, like that 1/2 inch, whatever you feel is easier for you to sew. The other option, of course, is you don't need to pin. Well, you can pin and then you can baste, because that's going to hold really nicely in the machine as well. If you have trouble maneuvering with pins in, that is always an option. Never be afraid to do it, because 10 minutes spent basting could actually save you hours of unpicking. So that should sit nicely then to go through the machine. We'll go over to the machine now. So now I'm over at the machine. So as I mentioned before, always have the flat bit on the bed of the machine, because the feed dogs will help feed it through. So I have a 1/2 inch seam, so I'm matching that up. So you can see I'm keeping the top bit as flat as possible while easing it around these curves. And just try not to run over your pins, because that can be very, very bad. So as I maneuver it through the machine, I'm almost using my fingers as a pivot to make the circle go around as a circle rather than straight through the machine. And I'm just making sure each time I get to that next pin that the next bit is as flat as possible. So remember, these pattern pieces are designed to go together where you're sewing. That's the point that the two pattern pieces meet. So even though they mightn't seem to meet at the very edge, they definitely meet where that stitch line is happening. So the trick is to just have it as flat as possible where that stitch line is. And just pivoting it around your finger with your fingers like a circle on an axle. You can see that that has sewn together very, very nicely, and it's ready to be top stitched into position. Even with the top stitching here, I've still got the majority of the piece on the bed of the machine is the top of the hat, and I'm just once again moving it around like a pivot and just pulling that other piece away so that the seam is being top stitched to the crown of the hat here. So now you should have your hat. So we've got the crown with the top finished, and then this is the brim, which is double-sided. So now we have to attach this bit to this bit, which is quite tricky, but not impossible. So we need the fishing lures together. So I have quartered my circle, so that is the back, front, and then the sides halfway around. So we're going to start by matching the back seam. It's a bit bulky on that seam there. Okay, and then I will match the front. And then we're going to match each of the sides. Side there, and then it's a matter of easing it in. So once again, the point where these two parts match is at the stitching line. So this is going to be too big out here, and this piece here is going to seem like it's too small. But as long as you're going around and you are evenly pinning it, when you take it to the machine, it will ease in and work out. It'll be all okay. So just keep halving and easing. If you feel like you've got it too far over, don't be afraid just to unpin it and shuffle things around a little bit to make it fit better. Now that is all evenly pinned, so when we take it to the machine and sew it down, it should sew together quite evenly. So this is almost the final step of this hat pattern. So we're going to sew the brim to the hat. I recommend doing this so you're going to have the brim on the top side and the inside of the hat on the bed of your machine. The reason for that is the feed dogs will help feed through all this excess fabric so that it will then help stop it from puckering, and also all those pins are going to help that as well. So it's similar to the when we've sewed the crown on to the top. We're just going to very carefully sew around with our 1/2 inch seam allowance, taking the pins out as we get to them. And just easing these pieces together as they go through the machine. But provided all of your pinning is even, it should all sew through nicely. I've also taken the bed of the machine off, so I'm in free arm mode so that I can easily maneuver this through the machine like this. So now, if you can see that has all sewn around, there's no puckering, it's all sitting exactly where it needs to sit. There's maybe the tiniest pucker there, but I think that'll actually press out, so I'm not terribly concerned about that. But otherwise it's pretty good. And if you did have a pucker, you don't need to unpick the whole thing, you just need to unpick a section. Wherever you think if there's a pucker, you unpick that section and then you just repin it, re-ease it, and just sew that section in, and it should get rid of any puckers. And here is the finished hat. And it also can go, we made this one reversible. So hopefully you picked up some good tips to help you with your hat making and other similar sewing. Thank you.